I have published my Alvin Lustig zine example. Last week I showed you how to do a show and hide to create these buttons so that you could show one piece of information at a time. I also showed you how to create states and control viewing them with the buttons. So now this week we're actually going to combine some of these things. So I've set it up to do a show and hide with these buttons on the left, and then also to show you two different ways to display work. So these are books that Alvin Lustig did while working at Meridian Publishing. Each one of them can be looked at up close just by doing an object state. So these books on the left are buttons. I've grouped them with a little triangle. So when I click on the button, the triangle is red in the rollover state. So that's all this is on the left. An image and a triangle grouped together turned into a button, and on the button it tells it which object state to go to. So all of these books are piled on as object states, and a button can go to one state at a time. It doesn't have to go to all the states. It can just go to one. On new directions, the text at the top, and all of these are buttons with rollovers. So you can roll over each book and see a larger version of it. Two different ways to kind of combine things. So we're using a show and hide on the left. When I click on Meridian Publishing, everything here is hidden. This button makes all of those hidden and all of these and this block of copy visible. Another thing that I did is for the last page, I combined a little bit of copy about his furniture. And again, I'm finding more and more that I'm breaking up this copy and going to Chat GPT over and over again to get, for example, 60 or 70 words about his design of the Art Center, College of Design in Pasadena, and I've got a picture of it here. So Chat GPT wrote that for me. And then I wanted the same amount of copy about his furniture design, so I found out what he designed, found the photos. So like you, I'm probably learning more about this designer than I've ever known before. So the other thing that I've done is I've linked the video. So we have that page where I put the code for a video, right? Well, that falls under more. So I say, find out more with this video. And it takes me not to the video, but to the page. And on that page is the video. So I can play this video and I can still navigate around from this page. So I can go back to more. I can go to the book covers, typography, the timeline, and home. And you can see how this interactive PDF is so useful for telling a story. It can walk you through it so much better than print. And the animation and rollovers and thing adds so much to the storytelling itself. So now I want to show you how I made these buttons. I already showed you the cover. I showed you how I did this show and hide. And we worked on these object states with buttons. Now let me show you some variations that I did. So the first thing I set up was the content and the show and hide. So you can see that on Meridian Publishing, on this button, it is really important that you name things. Everything that is my Meridian button or Mer button is visible. The little triangle that I put there so that you can get the sense you're on this page when it first rolls up, that can be visible. The only thing that's ND that's visible is the main button, this one. Everything else here is Meridian, and it's all visible. On the New Directions button, everything that is new ND or New Directions is visible. The Meridian triangle, I don't want to see that. I do want the main button. That's why I named that main button, so I would remember that that one needs to show all the time. And then all the Meridian buttons are hidden here. And these two buttons are not hidden until triggered because we want them to stay up. Now let me show you how I set up the display of the work. So what I have here is object states and buttons controlling the object state. So this is an object state. You can see that there are 6 states. One of the states is blank white. I'll talk to you about that later. But all these states are full-size pictures of the books. And then these are buttons that do two things. One is they go to the object state. So right here, you can actually choose which object state it goes to. In this case, it's going to this one. The other thing that I need this button to do is I need it to hide the placeholder copy. Do you see where it says M placeholder? I don't want that copy there once I push on this button. So all of these are exactly the same. This is button 2. It goes to a multi-state. I can choose that multi-state to be this particular book, and it hides the placeholder copy. And then the rollover state on these is this simple triangle. So each one of them has a triangle that appears when you click on these buttons. Okay, so these, even though they're images, they're tiny images that are buttons, and they have a triangle grouped with them. This is the object state. And then back here is the placeholder copy. So anything that you're going to control on this page has to be a button, even if it doesn't do anything. So this placeholder copy just says M placeholder. And again, you really need to name things well. And it doesn't do anything except that with each button, it disappears. The M placeholder goes away. Okay, so you can have buttons doing multiple things. I could even have it do more. You can keep adding. Now let's test it. So when you land on the page, the triangle is sitting there. That's the one I had to turn into a button just so I could make it show and hide. So when we click on Meridian Publishing main button, that triangle pops up. It's also the same triangle that pops up when you click on it because it's in the rollover also. So when I click on this, all this information comes. This is the Meridian placeholder copy. Until one of these triggers an image from the object state, you want something there. So then once I start triggering these object states with these buttons, the main copy goes away. So now when we're talking about new directions, that is a different action. So let's make that visible. And I'll make Meridian invisible so we can see what we're doing. So on this one, this is actually pretty simple. I just have body copy, and I've made this into a button and named it ND copy. Each of these is saved simply as a button. And you can see that I also made sure that they were all lined up. So every time you have a button, you have a rollover. So that's what I used to go with the larger image. And I had to go through and make sure that each of these wasn't hidden by one of the other ones. So I played around with layers and things like that. And of course, all of these buttons are hidden until triggered, and they're actually triggered by this button. So on New Directions, of course, we're showing everything New Direction, hiding everything Meridian except for the main button. We are hiding the triangle. So let's test and see how this one's working for New Directions. Nothing much to it, just a larger view on rollover. Okay, so now let's really test it. Let's go over to Meridian and turn on that layer, and then let's see how it works. Okay, we've got our animation, Meridian Publishing, we've got New Directions, the triangle shows up and stays up, which is nice, so you can remember which of the publishing companies these belong to. So I'll show you one problem that I know about. When you go through these object states, it's all good until you get to the last one, and then that one's going to stay up there. There's nothing that can turn that off. So they're off until they're triggered by another state. So there's nothing there to turn that off. So what happens is that when you go to this one, that large last object state is still on. So we're going to do a workaround on this. So remember we have these object states, these books, and these are kind of the problem. Let's bring around our object states. And do you see how I have the last state is actually just blank white? Okay, so here's how you can use this to kind of shut down these object states, because there is no way of turning them off. You can trigger them on, but they don't go off, which I think is kind of a flaw, but this is how I've done workaround with it. So now, this last state, this button is going to trigger, because this button is the new directions, all these books. So when these books come on, a white box or a state will be triggered, and that will cover up the background. Now, it's also important that it's on the right place on the layers. So it has to be underneath the placeholder, but above all the buttons. Okay, so these are ways that you can kind of, once you start to understand the hiding and showing and multi-state, you can kind of design some workarounds. So this is going to go, in addition to all the show and hide that it has to do, which is the major function of this button, it's also going to go to a state with a white piece of paper. So on the go to state, I can select that white box and it's going to come up. Let's test it now. Now, when I go to Meridian, I see all this. When I go to New Directions, I see all that, which is great. But the problem that we were going to have is that when we trigger a state and then we try to go to New Directions, that state is still up. So let's see if that's still the case. Nope. So that white state 6, comes up when we push this button, New Directions, and covers the last state that was shown. So that's a workaround for that. So now we are good. The whole thing works. You don't have to follow this exactly, but I want you to think creatively about how you can make things show, disappear, go to a larger image, something like that. Because most of the design periods of designers that you're working on, there's a lot of visuals that we need to show. And so you have to come up with creative ways to keep it interesting, but also very streamlined. I probably, when designing this, would do both of these techniques the same. I only did them different to kind of show you the two ways that you can do it. On the last page, I put in some information about furniture and I put in some information about designing art center, but I also put in a link here. This link goes to the video. So what I like about this is I've planted that video on this page, and it's not going to come up when you click on more. This page is going to come up when you click on more. It's got furniture and it's got his architecture, but there's also more on this video. So when you click on that video, it takes you here. You can watch the video. You can go back to the more page or book covers, typography, timeline. And so the way that I connected that was simply, of course, to make it a button, and I had it go to a destination. And I should actually put a rollover on it. When you have something that's a button, it's important that it can be seen that way. So I'll just make this red. So once you've got all your buttons working and all your content set up, there's a couple things left to do. One is go through your entire zine and see if there's anywhere that animation could either tell a story or it could tie together the style and the look of the zine. So you'll see on mine, I've got animation on the home page. This type comes up and then these stripes go across. Second page, I have those same lines, but now they're coming down from the top. On typography, they come down and line up with the buttons. And on the book covers, it comes in from the left. And on the more page, it comes down the middle. So that's a way that I found to be as consistent as possible with the animation and with the graphics. So check it over and see if there's a way to do that. Also make sure that your type is all good, that there aren't any typos, their spacing is consistent. I have 2 different size body copies on here, but it's consistently so. So when the copy is dominant, it's this style sheet, and when the copy is small, it's this one. But it never changes from those 2. It's either A or B. Make sure your buttons, when you do a rollover, that it doesn't suddenly shift or move or things like that. Also take a look at the rubric so that you know how to get all your points on this. You're going to need to have navigation on every page, which means there's never a page that you land on that you can't get out of or back to the home page. You need to use hide and reveal buttons at least once, object states at least once. Use animation, I would suggest on every page, but maybe just once or twice. It's up to you, depending on your style. Use at least 6 pages, and then you're going to publish it online. If you're not able to do that, you can export it as a fixed EPUB and upload that. So here's what I'm looking for. I want you to have those show and hide buttons in there. I want to see some animation, object states, at least 6 pages. I want to make sure that your overall look reflects the design style that you're covering or complements it. Your typography reads well, so not being as specific as I was earlier with print, but I don't want to see a ton of hyphenations, widows. The typography has to have 120 to 140% leading so that we can read it well. It can't be covered up by images and things like that. Just good readability. The flow of content is good. That means that as we're traveling page to page or looking from one image to another, we don't suddenly feel like, where are we? How did we get tangled up in this? So it has to have a clean flow of information. All the buttons need to work. So the good news is that if you do have trouble the first time, you'll be able to revise it and hand it in by the 31st. There's a pretty good possibility that you might get tangled up in some of this at this last stage. So if you do, please email me. All you have to do is send me your InDesign file. I don't even need the images, and I should be able to untangle it. So good luck, and let me know how I can help.